Standing in the shadow of an ancient fortress, you can almost hear the echoes of history, not the clashing of swords, but the quiet hum of strategy unfolding. These towering walls weren't just built for war, they were masterpieces of foresight, designed to prevent conflict before it even began. Think about that for a moment. Some of the most formidable structures ever created were meant to make battle unnecessary. Their very existence speaks volumes about how ancient civilizations understood the power of deterrence, the art of diplomacy, and the brilliance of engineering. Today, we're stepping behind the walls of these lost fortresses to uncover what they can teach us about ancient warfare. Without the war, picture a world where the mere sight of a fortress could change the course of history. The Great Wall of China didn't just keep invaders out, it sent a message. The Alhambra's stunning halls weren't just for royalty, they were spaces where enemies became allies. And hidden beneath the earth, tunnels like those in Deringkuyu weren't just escape routes, they were lifelines, proving that survival often depended on outthinking an opponent rather than outfighting them. These structures weren't just stone and mortar, they were psychological chessboards where every archway, every hidden passage, and every towering battlement was a move in a game of strategy. What's truly fascinating is how relevant these ancient lessons are today. In a world where conflicts are fought with firewalls as much as fortifications, the principles remain the same. Preparation, innovation, and the sheer presence of strength can often avert disaster. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore how these silent sentinels of the past hold blueprints for modern strategy, revealing that sometimes the greatest battles are the ones never fought. So come with us as we decode the secrets of these lost fortresses and discover how their wisdom still echoes in the way we think about defense, power, and peace. The stones have stories to tell, let's listen. A fortress was never just a pile of stones stacked high. It was a statement carved into the landscape. Think of it like a chess piece placed strategically on the board of history, projecting power far beyond its walls. Take the Great Wall of China, stretching over thousands of miles. Sure, it slowed down invaders, but its true genius was in the message it sent. Crossing here would cost more than it was worth. That's the essence of deterrence, winning the battle before it even begins. And it wasn't just the Chinese who understood this. From the castles of medieval Europe to the hilltop citadels of the ancient Near East, fortresses were designed to make attackers think twice. But these structures weren't just about fear, they were also centers of civilization. Inside their walls, you'd find bustling markets, administrative halls, and even temples, proof that security and prosperity went hand in hand. The Rock of Gibraltar, for instance, wasn't just a military outpost. It controlled trade routes that fed entire empires. And let's not forget diplomacy. Many fortresses doubled as negotiation sites, where rival leaders met under the unspoken threat of the walls around them. The Alhambra in Spain is a perfect example. A palace where Christian and Muslim rulers brokered peace, surrounded by defenses that silently reinforced the stakes. What's remarkable is how these ancient strategies still resonate today. Modern nations invest in everything from missile defense systems to economic sanctions, not just to fight wars, but to prevent them. The lesson here is timeless. Real power isn't just in winning battles, but in making them unnecessary. So the next time you see the ruins of an old fortress, look past the crumbling stones. What you're really seeing is the blueprint of an idea that sometimes the strongest defense is simply making your opponent pause. The precision with which ancient fortresses were built would put many modern construction projects to shame. Take Machu Picchu, perched high in the Andes. Its stones fit together so tightly that not even a blade of grass could slip between them, surviving earthquakes that would topple lesser structures. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was genius. The builders understood something profound. A fortress's strength wasn't just in its height or thickness, but in how it harmonized with the natural world. They carved foundations directly into bedrock, angled walls to deflect landslides, and channeled rainwater through hidden aqueducts. Every detail served a dual purpose, practical and psychological. Then there were the layered defenses of European castles, where every element was a calculated deterrent. Moats weren't just water-filled ditches, they forced attackers into choke points where archers could pick them off. Curved walls, like those of Constantinople's Theodosian defenses, made siege engines less effective by deflecting projectiles. Even the spiral staircases, always turning clockwise, gave right-handed defenders the upper hand in close combat. These weren't random choices, they were the result of centuries of trial and error, refined into an art form. But perhaps the most ingenious innovations were the ones meant to avoid conflict entirely. The cliffside fortresses of the American Southwest, like those at Mesa Verde, were virtually invisible from below, blending into the rock face. Their builders prioritized stealth over sheer might, knowing that sometimes the best defense was never being found at all. Similarly, Japan's Heimji Castle used maze-like pathways to confuse invaders, buying time for negotiations or retreat. These designs reveal a startling truth. Ancient engineers weren't just thinking about survival. They were masters of prevention, crafting fortresses that made attacks seem futile before the first arrow was loosed. What's truly remarkable is how these techniques mirror modern principles of resilience. Today's architects study these ancient designs for lessons on disaster-proofing buildings, just as military strategists analyze fortress layouts to understand psychological warfare. The parallels are uncanny, whether it's a medieval castle's murder holes or a cybersecurity firewall's layered protocols. The goal remains the same: to outthink, not just outfight. These stones whisper a timeless lesson that true durability comes from marrying ingenuity with the unyielding laws of nature. Geography wasn't just a backdrop for ancient fortresses, it was their greatest ally. Imagine standing at the citadel of Mycenae, its massive stone walls crowning a steep hilltop. From this vantage point, defenders could spot approaching enemies miles away, while attackers faced an exhausting climb under a hail of arrows. This wasn't just about height, it was about leverage. The natural slope amplified the fortress's strength, turning the land itself into a weapon. But hilltops weren't the only strategic choice. Rivers played an equally critical role. Take the fortress of Carcassonne in France, nestled between the Aude River's bends. The water acted as a natural moat, forcing invaders to funnel into narrow crossing points where defenders held the advantage. And let's not forget trade routes like the Silk Road fortresses of Central Asia, which controlled the flow of goods and information. These weren't random outposts, they were choke points where a single garrison could dominate an entire network of commerce. The cleverest placements often exploited multiple geographical features at once. The ancient city of Tyre, for example, was built on an island just off the coast of modern-day Lebanon. Its walls rose from the sea, making naval assaults nearly impossible, while its harbors secured vital trade links. Even when besieged by Alexander the Great, Tyre held out for months, proof that geography could defy even the mightiest armies. What's fascinating is how these principles still echo today. Modern military bases often occupy high ground or key transit routes, and cybersecurity experts talk about digital terrain in much the same way ancient generals studied physical landscapes. The lesson is clear: whether carved from stone or coded in silicon, the art of defense begins with understanding the lay of the land. Walls didn't always divide, sometimes they brought people together. The Alhambra in Spain stands as a stunning example, its intricate courtyards and delicate arches serving as neutral ground where Christian and Muslim rulers negotiated truces. This wasn't just a fortress, it was a stage for diplomacy, where the very grandeur of the surroundings subtly reminded guests of the power and sophistication of their hosts. The Nasrid dynasty understood something profound. Intimidation could be elegant, and persuasion often worked better than force. Other fortresses took this idea even further. The Crac des Chevaliers, a Crusader stronghold in Syria, wasn't just a military base, it was a crossroads where cultures clashed and coexisted. Within its walls, Frankish knights and Arab emissaries traded goods, shared knowledge, and occasionally brokered peace. The fortress's dual role as both shield and meeting place reveals a nuanced truth. Even in eras of deep conflict, dialogue was often the real key to survival. But perhaps the most fascinating examples are the fortress cities like Constantinople, where walls encircled not just soldiers but entire communities of merchants, scholars, and artisans. These weren't isolated bastions, they were microcosms of the world outside, where trade and diplomacy flowed as freely as weapons. When Byzantine emperors received foreign envoys, they did so in throne rooms lined with gold mosaics, a deliberate display of wealth meant to awe visitors into compliance without drawing a single sword. The genius of these spaces lay in their flexibility. A single chamber could host a feast one day and a tense negotiation the next, its very architecture designed to shift the balance of power. High ceilings made guests feel small. Carefully placed windows illuminated the ruler's face while leaving visitors in shadow. Every detail was psychological theater, reinforcing the idea that peace was preferable to defiance. What's striking is how modern this all feels. Today's summits and embassies still rely on similar tactics: grand settings, carefully choreographed encounters, the unspoken weight of history. The lesson from these ancient walls is timeless. True strength isn't just in winning wars, but in rendering them unnecessary through wit, will, and the quiet power of a well-placed conversation. Beneath the towering walls of ancient fortresses lay another world entirely, a hidden network of tunnels, staircases, and chambers designed to turn the tide without a single clash of steel. The underground city of Deringkuyu in Turkey is perhaps the most astonishing example, descending 18 levels deep into the earth, capable of sheltering thousands. But these weren't just shelters, they were tactical masterstrokes. Imagine invaders breaching the outer walls, only to find the fortress eerily empty, its defenders vanished into secret passages, ready to reappear where least expected. This was warfare by misdirection, where survival depended on outmaneuvering, not just outmuscling the enemy. Other fortresses took this concept even further. The Hohensalzburg fortress in Austria had a network of escape routes so elaborate that besieging armies often found themselves chasing ghosts. Defenders could slip out under cover of darkness, resupply from hidden caches, or even circle back to attack from behind. And then there were the counter-siege tunnels like those dug beneath the walls of Krakow during the Mongol invasions, where defenders would collapse enemy-dug passages or flood them with water. These weren't just escape plans, they were full-spectrum strategies, turning the very earth beneath attackers' feet into a weapon. But the true brilliance of these hidden systems lay in their psychological impact. A fortress with known escape routes was like a chessboard with invisible pieces, unpredictable, unnerving. The Mughal stronghold of Gwalior in India took this to extremes, its rock-cut tunnels echoing with deliberate, eerie sounds to disorient invaders. The message was clear. Inside these walls, the defenders held every advantage, even when they seemed to vanish into thin air. What's remarkable is how these ancient tactics mirror modern guerrilla warfare and cybersecurity. Today's military strategists study these very passages to understand asymmetric combat, where the weaker side evens the odds through secrecy and surprise. The lesson carved into these stones is timeless. Sometimes the best defense isn't a thicker wall, but a smarter way to disappear. The moment an approaching army laid eyes on Babylon's Ishtar Gate, the battle was already half lost. Towering over 30 feet high, its cobalt blue tiles shimmered with golden lions and dragons, mythical beasts frozen mid-snarl, as if daring invaders to come closer. This wasn't just decoration, it was psychological warfare carved in stone. Ancient architects understood something profound. A fortress's true power lay not just in repelling attacks, but in crushing the enemy's will to even try. Consider the sheer spectacle of approaching these structures. The gates of Mycenae, crowned by two massive stone lions, sent a clear message: only the mighty could pass here. The zigzagging entrance passages of medieval castles forced attackers to shuffle sideways, exposing their unshielded sides while defenders rained down arrows from above. Even the colors mattered. The blood-red banners of Crusader fortresses weren't just for show. They triggered primal associations with danger and death. Every detail was a calculated play on human psychology, exploiting our deepest instincts about threat and survival. But intimidation was only part of the strategy. Some designs aimed to bewilder rather than terrify. The labyrinthine corridors of Japan's Heimji Castle, with their dead ends and sudden drops, turned invasion into a disorienting nightmare. Attackers might spend hours navigating false passages only to find themselves back where they started, exhausted, demoralized, and vulnerable. Meanwhile, defenders moved through hidden shortcuts, striking like ghosts before vanishing again. This wasn't just defense, it was theater where the fortress itself became a malevolent character in the story. The most ingenious psychological tricks were often the subtlest. The echoing acoustics of Rajasthan's Kumbhalgarh fort amplified even whispers among defenders, making their numbers seem limitless. The sloped walls of Constantinople made scaling ladders wobble precariously, planting seeds of doubt before the first climber fell. Even something as simple as a portcullis, a grated gate that could drop without warning, played on the fear of entrapment, triggering claustrophobic panic in crowded attackers. What's fascinating is how these ancient tactics mirror modern psychological operations. Today's militaries use everything from blinding strobe lights to infrasound frequencies that induce unease, direct descendants of Babylon's roaring lions and Heimji's maze-like halls. The core principle remains unchanged. The mind breaks before the body does. These fortresses stand as monuments to a timeless truth: that victory often belongs not to the strongest army, but to the one that masters the art of perception, turning fear itself into an impenetrable wall. A fortress with empty coffers was just a hollow shell, and ancient builders knew it. The real power of these structures pulsed through their bustling marketplaces, humming workshops, and vaults heavy with coin. Take the Rock of Gibraltar, that legendary sentinel straddling two worlds. Its value wasn't just in its sheer cliffs or arrow slits, but in its grip on the Mediterranean's throat. Every ship passing between continents paid tribute, fed armies, or fueled empires. This wasn't just a military outpost, it was a toll booth for history, where control of trade routes meant control of destinies. Step inside the walls of Carcassonne at dawn, and you wouldn't hear the clang of swords first, you'd hear the clatter of merchants setting up stalls. The inner courtyards of these fortresses often doubled as market squares, where spices from the east, wool from the north, and ceramics from the south changed hands under the watchful eyes of guards. Security bred commerce, and commerce, in turn, funded better defenses. It was a self-reinforcing cycle. The safer the space, the richer it grew, and the richer it grew, the more impregnable it became. Workshops tucked within fortress walls were equally vital. The Venetian arsenal, though technically a shipyard, functioned like a fortress economy hybrid. Its guarded docks could produce a warship in a single day, turning raw timber into naval power at breathtaking speed. Similarly, the Forbidden City in Beijing wasn't just an imperial residence. Its inner workshops produced silk, porcelain, and weaponry, making it both palace and factory. These weren't just places to hide from invaders, they were engines of production, where the very goods that financed empires were crafted under protection. Then there were the treasuries. The vaults of London's Tower held more than prisoners. They safeguarded the kingdom's gold reserves, minted coins, and even stored royal jewels. A fortress without wealth was like a lion without teeth. Its psychological power depended on the rumor of boundless resources. When kings needed to impress ambassadors or pay mercenaries, they'd parade them past these stockpiles, proof that their walls were backed by bottomless coffers. What's striking is how these ancient models mirror modern economic strongholds. Today's financial districts have their own walls, surveillance systems, encryption, and private security protecting not gold bars but digital currencies. The lesson etched into these stones is timeless. True power lies at the intersection of force and finance. A fortress that could feed itself, fund itself, and trade on its own terms didn't just survive, it thrived, turning its gates into turnstiles for prosperity. Even the mightiest fortresses couldn't outlast time itself. The silent ruins of Mesa Verde tell a particularly haunting story. One morning around the year 1300, the ancestral Pueblones simply walked away from their intricate cliff dwellings, leaving behind pottery, tools, and the very walls that had sheltered them for generations. Archaeologists now believe a devastating drought lasting decades forced their hand, proving that no fortress, however ingeniously built, could withstand the slow wrath of a changing climate. But environmental shifts weren't the only force that could topple these strongholds. Political earthquakes often proved just as destructive. Take Chittorgarh Fort in India, a sprawling hilltop citadel that withstood 3 major sieges over 5 centuries, only to be abandoned when regional power shifted to more prosperous cities. Its massive gates and towering walls stood intact, but without a kingdom to defend. It became a monument rather than a fortress. Similarly, the Crusader castles dotting the Levant were gradually deserted, not because their walls failed, but because the political will to maintain them crumbled. When the Kingdom of Jerusalem collapsed, no amount of arrow slits or murder holes could save these isolated outposts from becoming irrelevant. Sometimes, technology itself made fortresses obsolete. The star-shaped bastions of Renaissance Europe, designed to deflect cannon fire, were eventually outmatched by ever larger artillery. Vauban's ingenious fortifications in France, once considered impregnable, became expensive liabilities as warfare moved to open battlefields. Even the formidable Suomenlinna sea fortress in Finland, built across 6 interconnected islands, couldn't adapt when naval warfare shifted from wooden ships to ironclads. The very innovations that made these structures masterpieces of their era eventually sealed their fates. Perhaps the most poignant declines came from simple shifts in human priorities. The cliff palaces of Bandelier National Monument weren't conquered or starved out, their inhabitants chose to leave, drawn by better farmland or trade opportunities elsewhere. The massive hill forts of Bronze Age Britain emptied not with a bang, but but with the quiet realization that prosperity now lay in river valleys rather than defensive perches. These abandonments reveal an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the greatest threat to a fortress wasn't siege engines or shifting climates, but the slow erosion of purpose. What's fascinating is how these ancient patterns replay today. Military bases close when strategies change, border walls become obsolete with shifting alliances, and even digital firewalls require constant updates against new threats. The crumbling stones of abandoned fortresses whisper a timeless warning that permanence is an illusion, and true resilience lies not in stone but in adaptability. Their empty corridors stand as monuments to a single inescapable fact. Every defense, no matter how formidable, is only as strong as the world around it allows it to be. Ancient fortresses didn't just dominate landscapes, they shaped the very psychology of conflict, and their lessons ripple into our modern world in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. Take cybersecurity, for instance. The layered defenses of a medieval castle, outer walls, inner keeps, hidden escape routes mirror today's digital firewalls, encryption protocols, and backup systems. Just as a fortress gatekeeper scrutinized every visitor, modern networks authenticate every user, filtering out threats before they breach the perimeter. The parallels are uncanny. Both systems rely on the principle that deterrence is far cheaper than disaster recovery, but the wisdom of these ancient structures extends beyond technology. Consider NATO, a collective defense alliance that functions much like the mutual protection pacts between medieval city-states. The message is the same: attack one member, and you provoke the unified strength of many. This isn't just about military might. It's about creating a psychological barrier so formidable that aggression seems futile. The Hanseatic League of Baltic traders in the 14th century understood this perfectly. Their network of fortified trading posts wasn't just for commerce. It was a web of interdependence where an attack on one port triggered economic retaliation across dozens of others. Today's sanctions against aggressor nations operate on identical logic, proving that economic walls can be as decisive as stone ones. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the art of misdirection. Ancient fortress builders mastered the trick of making their strongholds appear impregnable, even when vulnerabilities existed. Modern nations employ similar theatrics. Think of nuclear deterrence, where the mere suggestion of overwhelming retaliation prevents conflict. Or consider how Singapore, a tiny island nation, projects disproportionate military prowess through cutting-edge technology and rigorous training, much like Malta's Knights Hospitaller once did with limited manpower and ingenious fortifications. The goal isn't to fight, it's to make potential adversaries question whether fighting is worth the cost. Yet the true genius of these historical blueprints is their emphasis on resilience over brute force. Just as the underground cisterns of Constantinople ensured survival during sieges, today's nations invest in supply chain redundancies and energy independence to withstand crises. The Venetian arsenal's ability to mass-produce warships in days finds its echo in rapid vaccine development during pandemics. Both are about adapting production to meet existential threats. What's striking is how these ancient strategies transcend time and technology. Whether it's the symbolic power of a fortress gate or the psychological weight of a cyberattack drill, the principles remain unchanged. Preparation shapes perception, and perception shapes outcomes. The silent stones of abandoned fortresses whisper a challenge to modern strategists, not just to build stronger defenses, but to craft smarter ways of making those defenses unnecessary. After all, the greatest victory isn't surviving a siege, it's ensuring the siege never begins. As we step back from these ancient walls, their lessons echo through time, not as relics of forgotten battles, but as blueprints for timeless strategy. The true genius of these fortresses wasn't in their ability to withstand sieges, but in how often they made sieges unnecessary. Think about that. Centuries before modern diplomacy or nuclear deterrence, ancient builders were already mastering the art of conflict prevention. The Great Wall didn't just keep invaders out, it reshaped entire economies, forcing nomadic tribes to trade rather than raid. The Alhambra's beauty wasn't merely decorative, it disarmed hostility with awe, turning potential enemies into reluctant admirers. What's remarkable is how these ancient principles still shape our world. When a nation invests in cutting-edge cybersecurity or economic alliances, it's applying the same logic as the builders of Constantinople's triple walls, layered defenses that make attack seem futile. Even social media platforms borrow from fortress psychology, using algorithms as digital moats to filter out threats before they reach the gates. The tools have changed, but the playbook remains eerily similar. Deter, outmaneuver, and when possible, avoid confrontation altogether. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the quiet resilience of these structures. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde weren't abandoned because they failed. Their inhabitants chose adaptation over stubborn defiance. That's the ultimate takeaway. True strength isn't just about standing firm, but knowing when to evolve. Whether it's a Bronze Age citadel or a modern nation, survival depends on balancing unshakable principles with flexible tactics. So the next time you encounter a crumbling fortress wall, don't just see weathered stones. See a manifesto carved in rock, one that whispers how preparation trumps aggression, how ingenuity outweighs brute force, and how the wisest commanders throughout history have always known the best battles are the ones you never have to fight. Which of these ancient strongholds left the deepest impression on you? Drop your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed unraveling history's hidden playbook, hit subscribe for more journeys into the past's untold strategies. The stones have spoken. What will you take from their story?